If we all can still remember, 2 weeks ago we studied Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 and 18, right? And there Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." And so we all know that when Jesus came to this earth, he didn't say that he would abolish the law. Instead, he came here to this world. He wanted to fulfill everything that is written in the law. So, in other words, Jesus did everything that was written in the law. And what is that law? This one. There are 10 commandments, 10 commandments of God, okay, and it's divided into two. If you can still remember 2 weeks ago, the first part is what we call how we show respect to our God. The first four commandments: do not worship any other gods, do not make any idols, do not misuse the name of God, and keep the Sabbath holy. And the last six commandments are our duties, okay, to show respect to one another as fellow human beings. Honor your father and mother, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not lie, and do not covet. And tonight's lesson, the topic is about do not worship any idols. This is the second commandment. Before we studied the first commandment, right, we talked about the only God whom we worship, the unseen God. And now the second commandment, do not make any idols. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20, verse 4 to 6. It says, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments." So this is the full version of the second commandment, okay? The full version of the second commandment, and it was said by God himself. And so God said that we cannot make any image in the form of anything. Remember, in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. Okay? So here's the thing that we can get. We even cannot make any idols to be worshipped. Just like we cannot sell cigarettes to smokers. In other words, when I sell cigarettes to smokers, and I cannot tell everyone that I don't participate in making people smoke. You understand? Because I'm the seller, that means that I make people smoke. That's the idea. In the same way, in here, we cannot make any idols to be worshipped. As you can see right here, you shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. So we cannot make an image, right, in the form of anything in heaven above. We cannot make any idols to be worshipped. See that? Verse 5, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them." So if we cannot make any idols, let alone we cannot bow down and worship them. This is the thing. We cannot make any idols in the form of anything. Remember, anything, okay? Including God. We cannot make any idols in the form of God, because we worship the unseen God. That's the idea. We worship the unseen God. You and I, nobody here has ever seen God. So that's why we don't know the form of God. And in fact, we are worshiping the unseen God. So that's why we cannot make any idols, let alone worship any idols in the form of anything. It's very clear, right? Let's go deeper. First of all, let's go to Joshua chapter 23, verse 6 and 7. Be very strong. Be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, without turning aside to the right or to the left. Do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not invoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them. So, this is, if you know the story of Joshua, okay, he's the one of the leaders of Israel. And after Moses, if you know that name, after Moses died, and then Joshua was asked to replace Moses, right? And this is the command from God to Joshua as he was entering Canaan. And you know, in Canaan, there were many nations there. There were many tribes. Okay. And so God has already warned Joshua not to follow, look at this, not to follow any other gods or any practices, I can say, because all nations, all nations in the world, you must know, as I've already mentioned over and over again, all nations in the world, they have something to worship. Okay? You understand? All nations in the world, let me tell you once again, all nations in the world, they have their gods and they have their objects of worship, right? Everywhere. In Thailand, in Indonesia, in China, in United States, in Europe, everywhere. If you can trace back the history of mankind, we all know that all nations in the world, okay, from one corner of the earth to the other corner of the earth, they all have somethings to worship, except for one nation, and that nation is Israel, right? So that's why God said to Joshua, remember, do not follow the practices that other nations did. See, do not associate with these nations, do not invoke the names of their gods, and you must not serve them or bow down to them. You cannot bow down to any idols. That's what God was telling Joshua. Exodus chapter 32, verse 2 to 8. This is very important. Listen. Aaron answered them, take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing,
and bring them to me.
So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast into the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. Then they said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. Okay, I want you to please pay attention to this Lord. Capital Lord. Okay, this is the unseen God, the one and only God of Israel, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's continue. So the next day, the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward, they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. Then the Lord said to Moses, go down, because your people whom you brought up out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and have said, these are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. So we got a story right here that you can see. Aaron, that time he was the high priest of Israel, right? Moses was on top of the mountain. And then while Moses was on top of the mountain, talking with God right there, and what did the Israelites do? They made a party, a feast down there, right? They took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron, the high priest. And then we could see right here, and Aaron made it into an idol cast in the shape of a cow, right? And then people said that, oh, Israel, look at this. These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. But we all know that the one who took Israel out of Egypt was actually who? God, right? And then this is very interesting. Verse 5, Aaron said, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. So we're talking about the real God. We're talking about the unseen God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? So they all know the real God, the one and only God of Israel, but they refer the calf, the idol, to the real God. You understand? And then what God responded? God said that the Israel have become corrupt. In other words, God didn't like it at all. Even though they said that, okay, Israel, the one who brought you up out of Egypt, actually God, all right, is the Lord. In here it said, Aaron said that tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. Aaron said that the Lord was the one who took us out of Egypt. That was correct. But when Aaron moved the glory of God to the idol, and things got different. And we can see right here, and God was really angry because look at this. As I told you before, God said that what? Israel have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of calf. Which means God doesn't like when people, what is it? People bow down to something else because that something else is not God Himself. That's why God was really angry. Even though they know that the one who brought them out of Egypt is actually God, they know, but they cannot treat that idol is God Himself. You understand? That's what I meant when I said that we cannot worship any other thing but the unseen God, which means that we cannot worship any idol. And people might say that, oh, maybe that's because it's the shape of a cow. You know, cow, right? Like the baby cow. Maybe it's because it's the shape of a cow. Maybe things gonna get different if the Israelites they make something more beautiful, like beautiful idol or beautiful image. Maybe God will not be angry. Of course, God will be angry because it's an image of a cow. But if we make something more beautiful, okay, God will not be angry. Some people say like that. But let's see, Isaiah chapter 42, verse 8. Listen what God says to all of us. I am the Lord. You see this capital Lord? Okay, the original word for this is, the four consonants. Okay, we talked about that actually 2 weeks ago, right? Lord. The Israelites, the Jews, they don't dare to mention this name. They just say Adonai or Hashem. And this, the Lord, is actually the name of God Himself. God says that I am the Lord. That is my name. I will not yield my glory, listen, to another or my praise to idols. So it doesn't matter how beautiful a statue is, or it doesn't matter how beautiful an idol is, but still, God says that I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols, which means that we cannot worship any other thing but God Himself. And how can we worship God? How can we worship God? Remember, we worship the unseen God. That's why we cannot worship, bow down to anything, to statue, to a tree, to rocks, to the mountain, to the sun. We cannot bow down to anything. Why? Because God said that I will not yield my glory to another or my praise to idols. Okay? Exodus chapter 34, verse 6 and 7. This is now we're going to talk about the second part of the commandment. As you can see right here before, in here it says that you shall not bow down to them or worship them. Why? Because I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. Okay, first of all, you can see right here, God is a jealous God, which means that, as I said before, God doesn't want to give his glory to anything else. Okay, so as I mentioned over and over again, we cannot worship any statues, we cannot worship anything because he is a jealous God. Okay, this is just the description of God. Because when we worship something, God in heaven will see, hey, rain, who are you worshiping? I'm here up here. Why are you worshiping that? You understand? So that's the idea of a jealous God. All right. But then we got another phrase right here. We can see punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. And people get the wrong idea of a mean God, as if like God is really mean God, as if like God is really bad because children don't know anything, but they get punishment as well, as you can see right there. But let's check it out, what that really means. Here, Exodus 34, verse 6 to 7. This is the meaning of it. Let's see. And he is God. He passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger. Remember, God is slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet, remember, pay attention to this one. Yet, God does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. And still, we might get confused. Okay, in here it says that God is slow to anger. God shows compassion. God is a gracious God and abounding in love and faithfulness. But why in here says that God does not leave the guilty unpunished? He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents. What's going on? It's not the children's mistake, but why God punishes the children? That's the question. But let's get deeper. Okay, we need to know the real meaning of that. Okay, let's find out. Lamentations 5, verse 7. Our ancestors sin and are no more, and we bear their punishment. So this is very interesting. As you all know, the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, they were asked not to eat the forbidden fruits, right? Do not eat the fruit because the day you eat this fruit, you're going to die. That's what God says. But what happened to Adam and Eve? Did they eat the fruits? Yes, they ate it. They ate the forbidden fruit. And what happened after that? Because Adam and Eve, they ate the fruits, and now we can see the miseries, right? We can see the pain all around us, right? Like right now, I'm a man, and God says that because of Adam and Eve, they did not listen to God, and now all men in this world, they have to what? They have to work hard to earn money. They have to work hard to feed their family. And how about women? Because of Eve, she ate the forbidden fruit. God says what? Because of Eve, all women, when they want to give birth to children, they're going to feel the pain, right? And so right now we can see the world has become a miserable place. That's the meaning of Lamentations 5, verse 7. Our ancestors sin, and they are gone right now. They are no more. But we have to bear their punishment. Okay? It's different from Deuteronomy 24, verse 16. You can see right here. God says, parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Listen carefully. Each will die for their own sin. This is really interesting because God is a just God. which means that if the parents are wrong, they're going to, how can I say, they're going to get the reward, right? They're going to be, for example, if the mistakes that they have is like deadly, they're going to bear the consequences, right? But the children are not going to be punished because of the mistakes of their parents, all right? So this is this is what I can say. This the conclusion, all right, of what we just learned. We have to differentiate the consequences of sin and the reward of sin. Listen, because our first parents, Adam and Eve, sinned by eating the forbidden fruits, we all get the consequences, right? We all get the consequences. That's what we call the consequences of sin, right? Another story. Since the Israelites sinned against God, because the Israelites sinned against God, their descendants, descendants, their children, they all get the consequences. For example, they were taken captives in Babylon. You know, that's not the mistakes of their children, right? But because of the parents' mistakes, they didn't listen to God, they didn't do the commandments of God, right? And they mistreated all the widows and all the orphans right there, and God was really angry. And so God let that thing happen. You can see right here. Right? God let that happen to them. Their descendants got the consequences, which is they were taken captives in Babylon. That was the consequences of sin. It's different from the reward of sin. This is the reward of sin. For example, when we have a free sex lifestyle, right? We have a free sex lifestyle. We sleep with all men or all women that we know, for example. And then when you have HIV, when you have AIDS, you cannot blame God because of that. It's because of yourselves, right? If you and I, we smoke a lot, and after that we got, for example, let's say lung cancer, we cannot blame God for that. It's because of ourselves, right? Because we smoke a lot. That's what we call the reward of what we do. The same thing, the last one. When we refuse God, there is no salvation, which means that we are going to get the eternal death. And when we get the punishment, we cannot blame God for that. Why? Because that is the reward of our sin, which means that we don't want to talk about God. We refuse God totally. And that's what we call the reward of sin. Okay? So I hope that starting from now, we all understand this verse saying that, where is it? Sorry. Here. Punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. That means that the children are going to bear the consequences of sin. You understand? The consequences of sin, not the reward of sin. Because the reward of sin is going to be on the doer themselves, right? If the children's mistake, the children are going to be responsible for their own mistake. See, parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. So again, we have to differentiate the consequences of sin and the rewards of sin. Okay? Now, let's repeat what we learned 2 weeks ago. Acts chapter 17, verse 22 to 25. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." Yeah, previously, before we started this session, right, I asked Ben, right, how is in Vietnam, right? In Vietnam, are the people there religious? Because I can see when I was in Thailand, there were so many people who were religious, right? No matter what religions they have, but they were very religious, right? And then Apostle Paul also said, "For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. This is very interesting, and this is very crucial. And God Himself, He is not served by human hands, as if He needed anything, right? Rather, He Himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. So, as I mentioned before, if you can remember, when I met one of my acquaintances, right? He's actually my senior friend because he's much older than me. He was previously Buddhist, and then he changed his faith into the believer of God and Jesus. And then he said to me that when his house was on fire, right, he took the statue, a big statue of Buddha, he took it outside. He succeeded in saving the big statue of Buddha, but he lost many things inside. But then he was still thankful because he could save the statue, the idol. But then he thought to himself, why should I save this statue? That's what he said to me. Why should I save this statue? He should be the one who saved my life. Why I got it differently? Why should I save this statue from the fire? He should be the one who saved my life. And right at the moment, he started to question everything that he believed. And finally, he changed his faith. The idea that I want to tell you here is, you know, there are many people out there, they are very religious. And I'm very respectful, I can say, when I see their religious life. I really admire them. When I saw like some Thai people out there, I really admire them because they have time for their gods. You know, as they're walking down the street and as they see the shrines or whatever it is, or the temple or the statues, they will stop right there. They will look at the statue and they will worship the statue. And that is very, how can I say, very religious, I can say. But then, just like Apostle Paul right here, and I also have the same problem, which means that I need to tell them that the Lord of heaven and earth, He doesn't live in temples. He doesn't live in church. God Himself, He doesn't live in church alone, in temples, in mosque, you know, for the Muslims, or any other, how can I say, houses of prayers. No, God doesn't live there. You must know that. God doesn't live in houses of prayers built by human hands. No matter what religions you have or I have, no. Because God is not served by human hands as if God needed anything. No. God whom we must worship is, is the Lord of hosts. He's the creator of heaven and earth. And so that's why that God whom we should worship or whom we must worship, He Himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. And that God is the one that I'm promoting here. That God is the one I'm telling you all here. No matter what religion you have, that God, the unseen God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the unseen God. And so that's why we cannot worship any idols. Last slide. Furthermore, idols nowadays have become in various forms. Okay, not only as a statue. People say that, oh, I don't have any idols, so it means that I don't worship, you know, idols. Okay, I don't worship any statue, so it means that I don't worship any idols. But remember, not only as a statue, but also as something else. Listen, when we treat or care more about something or someone more than God, that particular thing or person has become our idol. Be very careful, my friends. Job can also be an idol. Hobbies can also be an idol. Friends can also be an idol. Money can also be an idol. Children, parents, and many other things. They are eligible to be our idols. Let me tell you, for example, you know, if, for example, someone like offers me to get lots of money, right? But on the other hand, it's against my conscience because I need to lie or I need to become corrupt, right? But then I just want the money. So I don't think about God anymore. So that money can be my idol. You understand? Or we have to worship God. For example, we have already set the time to have, let's say, this fellowship, or we want to get together to pray for one another, like this fellowship, for example. But then at the same time, our friends ask us to eat out, to drink out, to hang out outside. And right at the moment, our friends or friendship can be our idols. So be very careful, my friend. Anything or anyone, all right, that we treat or care more than God, it can be our idol. So that is the message for tonight. Okay. Hopefully, starting from now, we know our priority, right? We know our priority. We cannot have any idols. We only can worship God and only God alone. Why? Because God is a jealous God. God doesn't want to be number two. I even told my wife that I'm sorry, my wife, you are my number two because my number one is my God. And I hope that you also can get the same idea because only God is the supporter of our life. God gives us money. God gives us health. God protects you and me from this COVID. God gives you blessings. Why you still get a job? Because of God. Whether you realize it or not, everything is all because of God. So that's why right now we are asked not to worship any idols in the form of anything. It could be statues or it could be anything else that we care more than God. That's the message tonight, and hopefully we get the idea. And it's time for us to have a discussion. If you have any question or if you want to give insights, feel free to do that. Thank you, everyone.